This episode of Design Truth is sponsored by Solid Solutions, the #1 reseller, training and support provider for Solidworks. So thank you for coming on and joining us on this Tuesday evening.
Tuesday?
Is it Tuesday? Is it Monday today?
Monday.
It's Monday. Good job you were on it.
It's the clocks. Blame it on the clocks going forward.
Oh no, it was funny. I spoke to someone the other week, and it must be the other month actually, and they told me it was February, and I didn't even know it was February. So maybe once you start the whole new business thing, kind of dates just kind of all merge into one. You don't really know what day it is half the time. So that's my life.
You're working that much that it does tend to do that.
Yeah, cool. But obviously, thanks for coming on. And as we were just saying off camera, there we were supposed to kind of meet each other in the flesh at Design Truth event. Did you manage to get home okay, Win?
From the event, yes, I did. It started raining a lot, and Uber's a bit of a mission to get hold of in the middle of London, especially at that time of night. But so now it was a brilliant event. I think you should be really proud of yourself for setting up the whole event. And how many people were there? 100, 120 or something?
100 plus, yeah, 100 plus on a tube strike. So
Win sounds I've missed it.
Yeah, Win was one of the last people standing.
Good on you, Win.
when I left, and it was a good one. Hopefully, we can put some other ones together over the next couple of months or so. And I think it was quite apparent how much, whilst we enjoy these podcast things, it was quite telling how people liked actually being in the same room rather than just listening. For a change. So yeah, if you were there, don't worry, there will be another one, I'm sure, over the next couple of months or so. But James, I always do a really bad job of this, so please feel free to introduce yourself to the people that are listening. I'm sure they'll know who you are already.
Yeah, introduction. So I run a design agency called Blond. Blond's been around for about 7 years, trading for about 6 or so. We are an industrial design agency primarily. We do bits of branding occasionally, and that usually goes hand in hand with startup or sort of smaller clients, trying to offer them the full package. But generally speaking, our core discipline is industrial design. We're a relatively small team of 12. Probably should be about 15. That's the aim. It's part of your brief, Brad. We work on everything from sort of conceptual work for the likes of Sony, all the way through to kind of startup clients and helping them get ideas through to fruition. I think that's probably the sort of like nutshell.
So I put something up on Instagram a couple of days ago, which is like, we've got you coming on. Any questions? And
that's some deep questions.
There was a particularly deep one, which I don't think I will be answering, which is, are you happy? And I thought, Jesus Christ, that's a bit of a strong one.
How much time do you have?
Yeah. I'll take a question or two from you, but that one was a bit like, I don't think I'll answer that one.
I don't think I can. I don't think I can in one podcast. But I appreciate the questions anyway. So.
Yeah, there was quite a few that come through, so I'll do my best to try and weave them in as we go. But one of the common ones was, why Blond as a name? That was quite a common question. Was, how did that come about? So, is there a story behind it or not?
There is indeed a story. It's kind of long-winded, but I'll go for it.
Go for it.
So I was looking for a name for ages, and I remember doing a little brainstorming workshop session with a couple of friends when we first started out. I was looking for something that sort of represented what we stood for, obviously, and trying to find something deep and meaningful. And I think the first name that came to mind was Cohesion, and we were like, yeah, that's definitely the name. So I went to bed and slept on it, woke up in the morning and forgot what it was. So that definitely wasn't the name. So right, okay, start again from scratch. And one day, I think it was on the tube on the way home from my current job, which was Priestman Goods. We heard of that design agency, transportation. I just had this thought about our process and what we represent and what we want to be. And almost like I almost consider it as like a blank canvas, a bit like a website, white background. The work does the talking. And blonde is a color of wood. It's kind of like muted and unobtrusive. And I kind of like that as a story. Additionally, I was kind of looking for, I had a couple of things in my mind. There's a couple of, I think I mentioned this before on the previous podcast, but I'll do it again because it's quite a good descriptive or narrative to how I came up with the name. But I kept thinking about a couple of brands that stuck out in my mind, or bands, or whatever it might be, any kind of names. And that's what I was looking for, something that you wouldn't forget, right? Like Cohesion. And I just kept thinking of these ridiculous names that people have called themselves. For example, I'm not really a fan of them as a band, but they kept popping into my head, which was Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's a bit of a ridiculous name, right? But you don't think of the actual, hot chili pepper. You think about these, shirtless Californians and the music they create. And then the other one was Acne, which is a clothing brand, and they create beautiful clothing. Maybe it means something else in French, I'm not sure. But the first thing you think of is acne, right? Actual spots and things of that nature. But you don't associate them at the end of the day with those things. You associate with the work they produce. And so Blond, as much as it is about being muted and unobtrusive, also it's not something you're going to forget because there is connotations of hair color, right? And so that was one of the reasons. It stands out, and I'm not going to forget that name. I was validated when I went to my first meeting of LG, and we were walking into the room, and the design director of the UK said, "Oh, I thought you were going to be wearing blonde wigs." And although it was a bit of a joke, and he was taking the piss, fair enough. He's not going to forget the name, is he? So I knew it worked, and I was quite happy with that.
Yeah, Design Truth was just what can I get for a £1 domain?
That's often yeah, I'm quite sad I didn't get the .com. Unfortunately, someone did offer me a deal for £250,000. I was like, you know what? I think I'll just stick with the .cc.
Bloody hell!
There's other things like I was quite keen for it to be quite high in the alphabet in terms of being directories and things of that nature, and I wanted it to be short. I mean, I'm a bit lazy with email addresses. I wanted to be as short as possible. Yeah, so that's the main story, main reasoning behind it.
Maybe there should be a thing for like design agency random generators for names or something. Maybe there might be a bit of interest in that. But yeah, that was a really common one. Question was like, why blonde? I guess that's part of the magic, I suppose, is that it's kind of creating that kind of creates that kind of interest. Have you ever thought about your own agency win and names and things like that? Or
I have not names, but yeah, the idea of setting something up is certainly interesting. But yeah, I agree with what James is saying. I don't think the name really means anything anymore. People, associate it with something. I even find that even the spelling of things now doesn't really matter. People are going to go, oh, well, if you look at different kind of musical artists that are out there now, and like the missing vowels, or it's just like no one really cares. They just say what it is, and there we go. So I think the important thing is that you associate it in the context of what you're presenting it, rather than you call it carrot, and it's just that doesn't really matter.
The work takes the forefront, right? That's the most important thing, and that defines who you are and what the brand is.
Was you quite conscious? Was you quite conscious not to name it after yourself? That could be a bit of a trap. That could be a bit of an ego thing. I've always found is that if you name the company after yourself, it gives me a little bit of insight into your character, I suppose. But was you quite conscious about not doing that?
Yeah, completely. I just wanted eventually, as the company grows, there'd be different voices within the company. Obviously, at the moment, I'm taking the stage and being the spokesperson for Blond, but hope that in the future, more people within the company have different skill sets and very different interests, which is part of our hiring process, I suppose. Have an opportunity to speak, and not being James Media Agency or whatever it might be, facilitates that, I guess. Yeah. And also the ego thing. I mean, I kind of shy away from any of this. You've noticed I haven't really done many podcasts and speaking events. It's not because I've not had the opportunity. It's more I kind of just like getting on with the work, to be honest with you. Well, I'm not enjoying this, Brad.
I think on that, the work is exceptional. I think everyone who knows anything about Blond design through whether it's social media and your website, I think, you know, there's a distinct care for aesthetics and detail all the way through. I was kind of quite interested in whether or not, just prepping some questions before coming, whether or not you kind of feel like you adopt a bit of a house style within the projects. Obviously, you're working with other brands, and I'm sure they've got various guidelines, but do you feel that you can almost recognize a Blond design from a series of images? I don't know if that's something you consciously think about.
I think it's not something I consciously think about, actually, but it has come up, and it's come up in quite a negative way, actually. People worried that maybe if they hired us, maybe there'd be a Blond aesthetic, quote unquote, attached to whatever product they create. And equally, it's also been a positive. Lots of people come to us for what they envision a Blond aesthetic to be. But personally, I don't really see us as an aesthetic. I kind of see it as a process which ends up with something that is stripped back. And so I guess there's an inherent minimalism to what we produce a lot of the time, because that's what we believe allows a product to have longevity visually and no obsolescence in terms of, you know, visual identity, which is really important in terms of sustainability as well, right? So,
is that minimalism something that you mentioned the process? Is there kind of times in the project where you consciously kind of go, stop, what can we remove from this? And, you know, do you do that consciously? Is it active or more passive, I wonder, as you go through things?
It's relatively active, I think. I mean, just today I had, I think, 3 different project reviews with the team. I think almost in every single one of them, there was the same comment, which I'm sure they get sick of. But eventually they see that it comes out with a really nice kind of, not just looking product, but functioning product. Is the comment's always the same. It's, you know, this could be 3 concepts, not 1. So split it across 3. And you know, make one key focus and stick to that, and that will be the driving force for the product.
Yeah, I mean, I think the again, this driving style that kind of comes through a lot of your work is, I think that's, you can tell it's been pushed for that minimalism and simplification all the way through. So it's yeah, it's really nice to see all the images that you've got.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad you like the work.
I'll take you back to 2014, was it? I think when you started.
Yeah, 2014. I think I incorporated 2014, but I was still working at Priest and Good at the time.
Okay.
And we went full time in 2015, early 2015, I think it was. I did at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it something you always wanted to do? If you was working, and was it like a conscious thing of one day I'm going to do my own thing, or was it just something that through circumstance? What was the kind of the lead up to thinking, you know what, I'll give this one a go?
I think I always knew I wanted to be my own boss. I don't think I always knew that I wanted a design agency.
Right.
I kind of fell into the industrial design profession somewhat, fortunately, because it really does work for me. Yeah, very fortunately. It got to the point where I was working for another agency, and as much as they do produce some good work, you know, I think they do create a lot of styling, which I think has its place, but it wasn't really for me. And they're producing great work, but it wasn't really it's not really how I would have handled the situation, you know, certain projects and the way they run the company. I'm not saying it was wrong, it just wasn't for me. I was watching it as I was watching it be run, I kind of realized actually maybe I should just do something that was different, you know, in response. And yeah, so I was at a point, I suppose, and I had 5-6 years experience outside of university. I'd been at that one agency the whole time. And I went to Priestman Good, I think, with the intention of doing something, going to another agency that was completely different. So that when I did start my own agency, which I wanted to be slightly more similar to the first one I was working for, there was a nice gap in between, and I had broadened my skill set and knowledge base into something much larger and longer projects, so that eventually I could start something that was, you know, amalgamation of all my experience that was very different to anything else that was out there at the time.
I suppose also good for you to ascertain different cultures within agencies and different approaches, and so it's not. I think sometimes what happens is when designer joins an agency, they don't like it for whatever reason, they then have this kind of rule where they think, well, that applies to every single design agency, and it's like, that's not necessarily the case, you know.
They're very different.
Yeah.
I mean, it almost comes down solely to the founder and founders and how they view workflow and manage employees and manage project workflows. So they differ completely. It's almost like personalities, like fingerprints.
Yeah. So 2014, you set up shop. Was that, I don't know, in your back bedroom or whatever? And what are those first 100 days like? How do things begin?
So I started. So once I'd gone full time. I was in the back bedroom. Remember, I painted it completely white, and I had to strip everything back when I sold the property. It was quite quite a job. But I started it was 2 desk spaces, and very quickly, actually, very fortunately, won a couple of projects. I don't know how. I think it was a relatively streamlined web space, kind of like presence. So fortunately, we managed to find some work. And on top of that, we also managed to, just through my contacts and my people that I've worked with in the past, managed to get LG as a client. So we worked in the bedroom. I worked in the bedroom. I say we. I've got used to saying that. I worked in the bedroom. I worked in the bedroom for a couple of months, 3 months or so. And actually, I should go back a little bit in time and say that to start the company, I took a loan. I took a £15,000 loan at the time, and now looking back, I think that was extremely naive. I thought that would cover me, I'll get loads of work straight away. Not quite the case. I think I was actually quite lucky, to be able to find the work that I did. Anyway, so we quickly graduated from the bedroom to a workspace in the little house. It was a really small little studio. I think it was 400 square foot or so. We had LG visit as well, which was great. I remember one of the LG team saying, on the way to the toilet, do you think I'll see any rats? It was that kind of like level of studio. It was really lovely. I think that the shared corridor wasn't the best. So I kind of see what he was saying. And we worked out of there with an intern and a full-time designer at that point for 6 months to a year. So that was the first 100 days. It was generally working on some point of sale things as well as some elements for LG, who were really good to us, kept bringing us back work after the first project we worked on.
Yeah. So you brought hires into the business quite early on then. It was a conscious thing of, I'm not just going to do this by myself for a bit. It was like, I want this to scale in some capacity.
Yeah, completely. I think design is best not done in a silo, right? More minds the better. So we took a placement intern, someone's actually in a university degree, and 2 hires, I think it was. It was important from the outset to make sure that there was a couple of different brains in terms of ideation process. Really, really benefits from different people's thought processes.
LG was a pretty prestigious kind of one of the first clients to get. How did that come about? If you're able to.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. That was cold calling.
Wow, really?
Yeah, not something I've done for a long time. Cold calling, it brought some good clients in. I mean, Sony as well, I think. Some quite
you
large.
Just bring up the main number when you Google LG.
It was, it's so nerve-wracking. I remember I had like a
design.
Yeah, it was it was Googling like HQs of the UK and working out what the numbers were, and then trying to tactically be put through to the design department to say hello, and then try not to sound too much like a salesperson, and at least get a face-to-face meeting so they could see that we meant business and we could do the work. It was tough. I haven't done that for 4 or 5 years or so, and I really hope that I never have to do it again. It's really tough.
Yeah, it's one of my worst nightmares is when you have to do those kind of things. It's just, I just don't like it. I don't like the idea of calling someone that, which is ironic for the job that I do, but I just don't like calling someone that isn't necessarily prepared or wants to call, if that makes sense. It just doesn't feel quite natural. So Yeah,
I agree.
but
It's a particular trait, though, isn't it, of the startup person who is trying to push to drive to some success. And I'm just watching the Kanye West documentary on Netflix. Apparently the second, third episodes aren't that good, but the first one was brilliant, just in terms of seeing his raw talent, but his determination and his belief in himself of going up to, you know, two of the biggest kind of hip hop record agencies at the time, and just literally walking into offices, putting his CD on, listen to this. You know, it's pretty inspiring. You know, think of what you want of him, but just that attitude, I think, is it rubs off on people when you see, oh, actually, that's what you've got to do sometimes to make it.
Completely, you've got to have a thick skin as well. You know, those two success stories that I mentioned there with the cold calling, they're accompanied with many letdowns and what you expect really from a cold call. When people cold call me, I try to be as polite as possible as I've been through the process. But you know, no one wants to be sold something, you know, out of the blue. So, yeah, having a thick skin and be able to sort of take it on the chin, basically, and just move on to the next one. That was probably the most difficult thing within the first 100 days, I think.
Was just the rejection of sorts of, and then you kind of really doubt, okay, does anyone actually value my work or my time, all those kind of things. So
yeah, it's just years of continuous rejection, basically. Not to make it sound, obviously there was massive benefits and really exciting things of building your own agency and walking in every morning and turning on the lights and admiring what you built within the first, you know, year or so. But yeah, it is accompanied with loneliness and a lot of rejection. So
I mean, that's one thing you're never going to be able to teach at a university, is it? I mean, obviously we don't want to go down a design education angle now, but I think it's, yeah, those attributes of behaviours you maybe ever get from a family or experiences that you've had maybe in, I don't know, teenage part-time work or something. But I think recognising, oh, that's what you need to do, or those are the behaviours you need to adopt to have your own business. I think it's not something you can teach, I think, a lot of the time.
No, it's definitely experience driven. And my advice is just, you know, if you want to do it, give it a go, right? And
what's the worst?
Stop to get what you aim setting out to do or achieve. So
the worst that's going to happen is you're going to end up having to get another job. You know, it's as simple as that sounds.
The way I look at it has always been and this is a constant thought that I've had for the last 7 years or so, particularly in the start, was what will I think on, particularly morbid, my deathbed, or in the future if I've retired and I hadn't given it a go and it's something I wanted to do. And that's driven me, I think, quite a lot. So
if we go full circle, then what's the last 100 days been like?
A lot of growth. Been really exciting, amazing projects. The team has grown in a way that has created this atmosphere in the office, which I hadn't anticipated being so good. So it's been really wonderful to watch characters come into their own as more people have joined and they've got more people to bounce ideas off of. But with the growth, obviously, there's some growing pains that are very manageable and surmountable. It's more of a managerial task. I mean, relatively stressful for me, but also equally really exciting.
Does your kind of day job fundamentally change? I suppose obviously you're still hands-on design in some ways, but have you found that a bit of a challenge where maybe other people are working on projects and you're facilitating more? Is that something that again comes with experience in learning how to best deal with that? Or
perhaps, I think for me there was a real sort of, how I put this, I kind of find out that I loved handing off work and watching people, surprise me and create great work. And I think managing and just being a director of people and a director of design is probably what I'm best at in comparison to being a designer. I mean, I'm not a half bad designer, but I really enjoy watching people do great work and helping them get there. And so I think it's quite natural for me. I'm very lucky in that sense. And handing it over to people, no problem at all. I thought there would be, actually. When I first started the company, I was worried about that. but no, that hasn't been an issue at all, interestingly.
Particularly if the standards aren't to the same, and particularly it's not your name on the door, but it's obviously, there is that sense of reputation and things. That's same with you, Win, in terms of managing and watching other people grow in the business and things. Is that a big part of why you do the job you do?
I think it is, I think there's maybe to a certain age you get to, or developing of grey hairs, but I think it's an approach of kind of, I won't say it's paternal in any kind of weird way, but I think there is an element of kind of going, here's someone who's maybe, short in confidence, or but doesn't really know where their level's at. And I think to be able to kind of, but give them the belief that maybe they don't have. I think that they know that you trust them, and I think that goes a long way. Like, it's surprising how much confidence genuinely improves the outcomes, in my opinion, anyway. And relative to projects, do you kind of keep some people core on projects and other people are a bit more fluid? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's something that's been changing in the last year or so. I heard that Apple have this kind of like process where they have like significant people on a project, and rather than it being a senior leading, sometimes it could be a middleweight leading and a senior supporting. And I really like that idea. I can't remember who told me that. Maybe it was John Marshall. But so we've been trying to adopt that slightly. So you'll have a project being relatively led. Let's say led's maybe a loose word, maybe guided by one individual, and then there will always be a group ideation session. At least everyone sees the project, and that's a nice way for everyone to know what's going on in the office, studio, and typically there'll be one or two support people, so say 70% of their time to 50% of their time, but one person full time on the project, so they understand the ins and outs of it, and they can sort of brief everybody else on what's happening. So yeah, each project basically has one core designer, depending upon the size of the project, 1 to 3 support people, and then always a group full ideation day at least, even if it's not billed for or part of the scope. I think it just benefits the project and the outcome.
It's interesting because I think just going through the portfolio, you've obviously got products that are, I would say, don't include tech, and some that do include tech. And what's your relationship with the technology developments? I don't know if you've got maybe a project that you could talk about, and people could look that up online if they wanted to, but obviously you've got quite a range. But are you doing it in tandem? Is it one before the other? And just interested to see how you go about that, to be honest with you.
So it will depend a lot on the client brief and what they bring to the table. So at the moment we're working on a breastfeeding device, and they brought the full internals, and we have an engineering team, and we're working alongside them, and the engineering and the internals and the tech is constantly updating. We're updating our design strategy and aesthetic kind of vision, and encasing their tech. In some instances, we're a little bit more hands-on. For example, we're doing something fitness related, connected fitness, probably all I could say. And that we're actually sourcing components and working out exactly what it needs to do, right? And so therefore, what is actually the materials, and how do they relate, and what kind of items can we source to keep the cost down, but also the quality at the right level. So it really depends on the brief at hand. People like, say, Sony, for example, might come to us and say, don't be too overly concerned with technology. Think about 4 years in the future. What materials, what technology might exist, right? You might have seen similar briefs, which are very exciting. And so, yeah, it's a mixture, really. Yeah.
What makes a good brief?
Oh, big question.
Hopefully not as deep as "Are you happy?"
Yeah, not quite as deep, but hard one to answer. It really depends upon. It doesn't depend on anything. I think I like variety in the studio. So it's not really an answer; it's a non-answer. But I like as many different briefs as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had 1 paragraph briefs from large corporations, and I've had like 24 pages from startups, and they're not any worse or better than each other vision. It just means that we have to react differently, and our involvement in sort of crafting the vision of the project is different. So I like both. And it's a non-answer, but there probably is such a thing as a bad brief, but I don't know whether I want to answer that.
Yeah. I suppose is your job as well to flesh that brief out as well sometimes. So it might come as that initial couple of bullet points, but actually when you get under the surface a little bit more, you can actually, there is a better brief in there than they may realize themselves.
Yeah, completely. That's a really important part of our quoting process, as we take the time to really flesh out, what are you actually trying to achieve here? Have you thought about doing this? We'll follow the process you've set out. It looks great, and your brief looks great, but have you thought about maybe doing this instead? Yeah, it's definitely something we'll try to do as much as possible. So with some clients, we kind of co-write the brief. And some clients come and it's very well put together, scripted, and we just say, okay, thanks, here's the quote, should we get going tomorrow, kind of thing.
I suppose kind of related to that, do you have I guess the types of clients do you have? I mean, how do they differ in terms of maybe kind of, I guess, that primary contact that you have? Obviously, you've got some really nice brands that you've worked with. Are they a particular person or a role in a company that you kind of find you're always dealing with?
Within the larger corporations, probably design managers and things of that nature. Within the startups, obviously, it can be, or even medium-sized companies, it's a COO or CDO or CEO, sometimes generally someone from the C-suite, or just a general founder. And a lot of the time, it can be one person startup looking to hire more people. It's really interesting watching companies grow. We're working with a client in California at the moment. They started as one person, and the project's been going on since October, and now they're about 15 people. So every time you get someone new coming in and being a new stakeholder, that's quite nice.
It's so get that in the day job as well. Actually, is when we used to do a lot of work with Arrival. They were actually originally called Charge Cars at the time, and they got a spin off to it now. But yeah, when you first start working with them, it's like 10 people, and they didn't even have a website at that point. And then I don't know, you go to see them 2 years later. It's like, yeah, we employ 3,000 people. It's like, bloody hell. It's just and all of a sudden, what does happen is sometimes that relationship and that dynamic can change with that as well, in terms of they might need you in a different capacity than they did before and things like that. But I suppose that's the beauty of it, is when you do it's part of the job, part of agency life as well, when things come and things go. Just from your own experience, obviously working in other agencies, what do you think does make Blond a little bit different to where you've worked before? Are there any kind of conscious things that you've put in place where you want to make the environment a bit different, or the work-life balance and stuff? What kind of, what's the, not the selling point, what's the difference to some of the others kind of down the road?
Yeah, down the road's accurate, right? They're within like 2 miles radius within London at least.
Yeah.
I can't really comment on places that I haven't been. And I've heard the rumours, obviously. But where I worked initially in the first part of my career, there was quite a lot of late nights.
Okay.
And it was kind of sold as, it's quite typical for the design industry. You've probably heard the same thing from multiple times. And, I went along with it. It was fine. I was working quite a lot of late nights. I mean, at least a couple of times a week, 10, 11 o'clock. I actually enjoyed it. I think I learned a lot from it. But I did see myself getting tired and the occasional drop in quality. And so for me, for Blond, one of the founding principles was that we'd try to work our allotted hours, which is 9 to 6, as much as physically possible. And we do. I think even with this growth and the sort of slight growing pains, which I've kind of outlined, there's still very, very little late nights. I can think of maybe a handful since the company started 6 years ago. And actually, I think, interestingly, it's such a simple thing, but just sort of extending timelines a little bit in comparison to what it could be, pushing back a week here and there, maybe making less money. Fine. The quality is a lot better for it. People have rested. They enjoy their work-life balance, and the creativity it flourishes as a result. So I did wonder whether that founding principle would mean that we would see ourselves financially sort of restricted, but it's not really happened like that. We just produce good work and we've got more work from it. So
heard something recently that someone had said that you can look at a product and you can get a sense of the company, maybe even the kind of org structure from looking at a product, or kind of how a project has been arranged in terms of, and I think that kind of energy and focus of maybe having people that are rested and have got good mental health, and be able to create good work. And again, you said before, having people that are consistent on a project and can maybe take that design language all the way through I think that's quite interesting, because I think you can look at some things and kind of go, that's a bit of a mess of a product, that, and it's kind of going, how has that become that? And it's been formed over time, and I think that sometimes the way that teams are structured, or ways of working, all these things, they can actually affect that end quality. So it does feel to me like what you've said there does come out as the outcomes that we can see on your portfolio.
Great, I'm really glad. Really glad.
So what does that mean then, do you think, for the next 5-6 years of Blond? Then obviously there's a few more of you there now, and the aspiration is for it to go a little bit more. But I suppose you're still at a stage where every hire is going to influence that culture and that environment. So what do you think? What does the next couple of years look like, do you think?
It's always been about hiring many different people as possible, like mixture of personality. That's really important. So that's going to be something going forward. I always said we wanted to be 20-ish people, and that is the aim still for me. So it might be that we reach that kind of amount and then settle into a sort of rhythm. And the reason for that is I think I can have a understanding what's going on in the studio. I can still have the kind of creative direction role amongst all those projects. The culture is not so big where you kind of get splinter groups. One kind of solid group that get on with each other, hopefully, at least. And I think just the general quality will never change, because hopefully, I'll always have an eye on the creative direction. So
you saw yourself kind of growing and bringing people, maybe, I don't know, a bit more front end in terms of people that are focused on research or anything like that, that kind of ethnography angle. Do you feel people bringing tech indoors? Is that the type of thing that crosses your mind?
Yeah, completely. So the next step really was and I think we have potentially, is to hire an engineering kind of hand. So everyone's an industrial design degree. So maybe hire one or two more that are slightly more BEng to sort of bolster that kind of DFM knowledge. We're really good at, and I pride ourselves on, but that's something I want to strengthen slightly. And equally other areas, like you say. So we do pride ourselves on strategy and research, definitely, but then equally we don't have a specialist strategic support. So hiring someone of that nature would be really good. So specialist, you're right, I think would be great. Also, people that would take off more management roles potentially, to make sure that everything runs smoothly. I pride ourselves on hitting deadlines and things operating smoothly. So potentially some more management roles as well.
Are there any? I'm sorry, I'm getting to work mode now, but are there any pain points with hiring and things in terms of, like, as you've grown? Have you seen things from a different lens, from moving from just a designer to an agency owner, in terms of the portfolios that have come through and things like that? Has it been a challenge in scaling that up to 12, 15, or has it been relatively pain-free?
It's been relatively pain-free. I think I've been lucky. I can see how it would be difficult. I think because of our online presence and being relatively well known, I guess, I'd hope, at least. You can tell me, I guess. Hiring's been okay. We put job adverts out, and people, we get hundreds and hundreds of applications typically. I think the job inbox, which is obviously unmonitored to an extent, between hires, it's got something like 3,000 unread, 4,000 unread, which is obviously an automatic response. I'd like to respond to them all individually, but have to hire someone individually to do that probably. That's meant that we've been fortunate in being able to hire. I think recently, though, it has become more of a struggle, just because we've been growing relatively quick, and there's always a job post out. So it kind of looks like maybe
People keep leaving.
yeah, exactly, which is not the case at all. We're just hiring quickly, and we don't have much Instagram presence. So our job posts kind of like back to back, as opposed to being spread out with work.
I would say that I think the work on product visuals that you guys do is again excellent, and I think I'm interested in the kind of role of prototyping and what kind of prototyping tools you have in the studio, because I think, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that relationship with prototyping, in-house, external, and that'd be quite nice for people to listen to, I think.
Yeah, completely. We use a range of different tools. So, we obviously have our externals. We've got a couple of contacts in China that create just amazing visual prototypes out of the correct material, often as well, for a really good cost and really quick turnaround. We have 3D printers in house, generally always running, often through the night because they're quite loud. Using MakerBots, I think we'll probably upgrade to Formlabs or something a little bit quieter. I'm currently sitting downstairs in our workshopping space, hence the slight echo and the people above making the noise. And down here is just a space for any kind of real messy prototyping, foam models, whatever it might be. I think sitting around some fitness devices with bits of sawn off metal and duct tape, real quick, crude models. Upstairs as well, within the main office, we have a little workshopping bench, which is, I think, the designers tend to use most of the time because it's so close to their desks and it has everything needed for making any kind of like card mock-ups or foam sanding, that kind of thing. And then down here in this particular space, it's bigger objects, and potentially was going to be turned into a huge workshop, getting things like laser cutters and bandsaws and things of that nature, but people don't tend to use it as much. I promote as much model making as physically possible, but so we might just turn this into a photography studio instead, maybe. We'll see.
Does that kind of come across sometimes in, obviously you've got 4,000 emails still to read or whatever applications, but did you find that sometimes a bit of a trend on some of the people that do come across where there's a bit of a reluctance to use those kind of tools, or is that something you like, people that do want to make and prototype and all those kind of things? Is that a big part of what actually makes you want to interview them in the first place?
Yeah, I think an understanding that 3D can't just be done in CAD. To really understand the 3D product, you have to actually see it and hold it, even if it is a card mock-up, or even, to be honest, just an external, even if it's just a printout. Actually understanding the scale of something is really important. So in terms of portfolios, yeah, definitely. Process is always great to see. It's just, if anything, just shows thoroughness and understanding of the steps you need to go through to get to the end result. At the end of the day, there will be a Blond process which is kind of suggested, but knowing that they've done that and have the capabilities to form something out of foam, or export something from CAD and make it out of card, is good, definitely.
Yeah, cool.
I think we're finding it's very hard to see through as time's gone on. I mean, when I first started industrial design, visualization was kind of a dark art almost. It was really difficult to do. Everyone's using 3ds Max and it was pretty unwelcoming software. I was fortunate as one of the agencies I worked at, I did quite a lot of visualization, so I could pull that through to the founding of Blond and some of the stuff we did. But now KeyShot is a great tool, and not to belittle what people are producing in it, it's easier to use, and therefore you're seeing a lot more really lovely polished renders. Fine, great. I always advocate that the juniors should have those tools at their disposal whilst they learn things like strategy and design thinking. But just that in the portfolio, it's not enough to see through. It's like a veneer. You almost want to see the underside, And so my general advice to juniors and, in terms of people coming on is to, let the design restrictions and the manufacturing process actually inspire the product almost as much as the pain points and the user's requirements. then very quickly it becomes something that needs to be researched and understood, and then you kind of surmount that problem. So there is always a constant requirement as we're growing for new talent, and so if anyone's listening, speak to Brad. We're continually looking for new members to join our family, as I like to put it. Maybe it's slightly cringe. So yeah, reach out to Brad.
Cool. I think on that, James, I mean, how would, obviously you probably get quite a few applications for any jobs, but Brad's obviously got a fair network, but how does someone stand out? What do you look for in a crowd of applicants?
The 3,000.
Yeah, on that note, I should probably say, applying, obviously through Brad, of course, but if you are applying directly, what no one ever does, at times of when there's a job post up, it's best, right? Actually, you know what, scratch that. You don't want to you don't want to talk about that, Brad. It's kind of like deferring work away for me.
Don't bother me.
No, you can axe that one out. Yeah, so things that stand out actually that no one ever talks about, where no one ever teaches. I mean, obviously showing a process, showing like a small amount of work, don't fill it too large, make sure it's a relatively small portfolio, nothing online based like it's and things of that nature. So really frustrating to click a link. A lot of the time it's done on the phone, you just open the PDF, you don't have to download the big one onto your phone. There's all those elements, but for me, one of the things that was never really taught was graphic design. I think being able to show a appreciation for other types of design is quite important. Well, actually, it's important, but actually how to communicate your work is more important. So essentially how you're presenting your portfolio to me or our company is going to give me a good understanding of how you might present an idea to a client. So if it's really clear and really nicely laid out and it doesn't leave me with any questions, there's not too much text, it's structured in a way that, you know, tells a story fluidly, that's going to catch my eye, definitely.
If a non-technical folk like me can understand it, then that's normally a good sign, is what I would say. If I can actually understand what you're actually doing. I sent you something the other day, didn't I? Of like it was an agency actually, which is the way they describe themselves. And I think design just has this kind of way sometimes where it just uses all this expressive language, and it makes it sound like just talk like a normal human being, you know. It's just don't get me started on those kind of talk about. I won't even read what they put, but I just sent it to you when I was like, this guy's talking a different language. You know, it's just yeah.
I think sometimes they speak in the right language to some people who appreciate that. You know, there are certain people, you know, sometimes you've got to understand the client and what language they probably understand, and arguably it could be somebody who does want that language, right? So it's just important to knowing your customer in that situation.
That is true. Yeah. I do think there's a confidence in being able to remove the sort of the fluff and get straight to the point. Almost that I kind of think of our presentations and the way that we present work to a client a bit almost like an advertising or marketing deck. You know, it's been stripped right down. You know, when you write a dissertation a long time ago for me, but when you write a dissertation at university, you write 10,000 words to cut it down to 5, right? And I think that's how a portfolio or a design presentation should be. Cut down to the absolute, you know, critical elements.
It's that classic, isn't it? If you can't get the attention, is it the first 10 seconds or something, then people only ever read the first 100 words of something, and all those kind of things that you've just got to kind of bear in mind. Lovely having you on. Next time, Design Truth Ensemble in London or whatever, the invite is always there as before. Good for you to kind of, you were going to talk as well, weren't you? Was there anything you were going to talk about that didn't actually happen? Do you remember what you was planning to talk about?
I hadn't written what I was going to write. I was excited about it though. It's a shame. I would have been there if it wasn't for my looming trip to Iceland, which I'm very fortunate to have actually managed to make it to. But yeah, thank you for having me on. It's been great to be a part of it.
This episode of Design Truth is sponsored by Solid Solutions, the #1 reseller, training and support provider for Solidworks.